Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. Going to talk about the new moon in Cancer, which is actually the second new moon in Cancer in a 4-week period, which is quite significant within itself. The last new moon was a solar eclipse, which was at 0 degrees of Cancer. And I've spoken about that, obviously, so I'm not going to touch on that, but it is significant to realize that we've got 2 new moons in a month. Both in Cancer. So that's, I mean, from a cosmological, spirit, divine level, consciousness, evolution, there's something really important relative to the message of the archetype of Cancer being transmitted through into our consciousness, and the importance of that at the moment relative to where we are at, both individually and as a collective human family as well. So that's really, really significant. This new moon, I'm not going to, I'm going to discuss it from a few different angles, but the truth of the matter is that it's quite challenged. You know, it has some really hardcore aspects by Saturn and Pluto. Specifically Saturn. Saturn is exactly, virtually to the minute, opposite this new moon in Cancer. And, you know, we're talking about Cancer and Capricorn, and we have the new moon in Cancer and we have Saturn in Capricorn. So we're really talking about our inner landscape, our inner life, our emotional life, our home life, our private life, and also our subjective self and our ego, because Cancer is the point in the zodiac that defines our sense of ego, the fact that we have an ego, as in a personality, a body, a name, an identity, right? So we have this sense of our inner frame, our inner landscape, our inner sense of safety and security, Cancer being totally faced off with Saturn in Capricorn, which is going to be experienced as pretty much the external systems that have a force of control, law, order, and limitation as well. So the Saturn will be sort of experienced from what's happening in the world around us. So it's coming back again to the nature of reality as we are experiencing it at the moment, and it's quite harsh. You know, that is the truth. So just a reminder of some key points about Cancer. It's a yin feminine cardinal sign. It's Cancer is Cancer is nothing without a home, without a sense of security and safety. That's its primary motivation, other than, of course, developing an ego and a sense of self, right? In Aries, it's the experience of experiencing ourselves instinctively, knowing that we are here, we're born, we've arrived, as it were. And Taurus brings in our experience of values, how we learn to value, you know, anything in life, really, including ourselves. In Gemini, it's the process of connecting the dots, making the intellectual connection with things, articulating, speaking, communicating. And then in Cancer, we get to that place where we give form, we give a body to what came before Cancer, right, which is the instinctual self. And it's the first water sign, right, out of the 3 water signs. So it's incredibly raw, emotional, sensitive, and very easily threatened, right? It's, you think about the crab, which is the symbol for a Cancer archetype. You look at the crab on the beach, you know, he's got his house on his back, right? And he walks sideways, which is that really sort of cautious. He's always cautious, you know, he's looking to be safe. That's really the nature of Cancer. It's about our own personal sense of safety and security. And we correlate that to, you know, our external environment such as, you know, where we live, our home life, our family, our actual physical home and space. And we're all really being forced to go back into that space, you know, because of the shutdowns, because of the restrictions, because of the limitations. And that is largely being interpreted as an experience where our freedom is being compromised, right? And I do understand that. It does feel like that. I'm not saying it doesn't, but we have to also recognize what's being called into our field of attention, which is to check back within ourselves and check our own sense of identity, who we are. You know, I mean, this is understood more from an evolutionary perspective, because this sense of identity is always becoming, it's always growing and evolving and expanding, right? Um, so I want to actually bring up the chart in a moment, because there's a few other interesting things going on relative to aspects. And I also want to look at the chart of the USA, because this new moon is very, very, very significant for US basically, right? And I know a lot of you are from the USA. Probably 80% of my audience is from the US actually. Um, Interesting, this particular new moon is also forming a conjunction to an asteroid called Apollo. Now, Apollo was a sun god, and he was a light bringer, god of prophecy, keeper of knowledge, and a symbol of consciousness. So his presence with this new moon is a statement around a new sense of consciousness being born into our own consciousness, being able to step further, more deeply inside ourselves, to check out ourselves, you know, check out our sense of identity, who we actually are at this point. See, when we are constantly externally focused, right, and you know, life appears to be running as normal, life has a way of constantly taking us outside of ourselves, because we are always engaged and involved and active in a number of different things, professionally and personally. And for the most part, very few people, you know, stop to pause and reflect and really consider things from an evolutionary level relative to how much they have grown, relative to exploring inner dimensions, right? So collectively, we are all forced in that one same position, which is to stop and reflect. And there's a lot of retaliation towards that. There's a lot of frustration, and there's a lot of resistance. And, you know, the more we push against that, the more this experience feels like a sense of our freedom being taken away, um, feeling like we are totally controlled, you know, and things like that. It's easy to step into that world and experience that, because everything around us appears that way. So the challenge is, how do you recognize what's going on from a bigger picture view, and not only seeing it from the apparent structures in play, but how do you see it as a more expansive, bigger picture view relative to our evolution moving forward, and what needs to truly change in terms of how we live as a human race and how we live on the earth plane. You know, these are the things that we are forced, as it were, to re-examine in ourselves, because by not being able to be so engaged with the external world, we've got so much time on our hands to take that journey, that inward journey of reflecting, examining. So again, you know, it's up to us how we manage what appears from that external level. So this new moon is speaking to all these points very strongly. because Saturn is right opposite this new moon. So Saturn is the government or governments or governing bodies, the law, structure, the nature of reality as it appears, and the forced restriction upon us. Now, Saturn's gone back into Capricorn. He made his journey into Aquarius, gave us a little prelude, a little view, and stepped back into Capricorn to finish his business. And this business is speaking very strongly to this opposition of this new moon. So, look, a new moon opposite Saturn it's not a pleasant experience as such, particularly when we are purely identifying it from the level of what's happening externally. Because what's happening externally is pretty chaotic and pretty catastrophic and pretty devastating in a lot of different ways. There's no argument there. But we must always come back to the understanding, inner standing, realization that the nature of reality as it appears is absolutely intricately linked into every single one of us. It's the collective unconscious being projected. So we can have resistance to anything, but the resistance is not going to be the key or the aid towards the transformation and change that we want to see, especially in a positive, healthy way. So it always comes back to ourself, the inner journey, the inner exploration, the honesty of looking at our own self relative to what it is we need to evolve on, expand on, develop on. I mean, the whole game of projection and blame, which is the world of the personality and the shadow, has been going on for eons, and it will continue. But it is also true that we've reached a point in evolutionary terms with our consciousness where there's a crisis in play. Crisis does not show up for no reason. Crisis is an opportunity to further grow. But the way we experience it is through external force, which we don't like. Of course, we don't like that. The sun god Apollo being conjunct this new moon has a very powerful frequency of truth and light that can come through into your consciousness. He was a teacher of truth and light and knowledge. So there's a lot of wisdom and knowledge contained within the vibration of this new moon, but we're not going to get it from out there. We have to be able to turn inward and go within. That's Cancer. Cancer, apart from all the things that I mentioned, it truly correlates to the inner soul dimensions of our existence. Okay, so I think with Saturn opposite this new moon, what we're really faced off with is our sense of security, our sense of safety. How safe do we feel with everything that's going on? That's what's really being challenged at the moment. And Cancer is an incredibly vulnerable sign, actually. Cancer takes things very, very personally. Anything that threatens its safety is a big deal. It's not like Scorpio, for example. Scorpio can walk through the dark alleys and the darker shades of life and really be at home there, as it were. In fact, dark alleys are ruled by Scorpio, whereas Cancer is about the nest, the womb, the comfort, the warmth, the nurturance, the safety. Okay, so let me just bring up some charts here. Now, So first off, here is the new moon chart. This is done for Melbourne, so it will look different relative to your location, but the position of the planets in the signs will be identical. They'll just appear different relative to the houses of the chart based on your location. So we don't need to worry about the location of where everything appears in this chart, right? So there's the new moon, 28 degrees of Cancer. I think the Sabian symbol is really quite interesting, especially with the asteroid Apollo being there. There's a similar message being conveyed both through the asteroid Apollo being on this new moon and the Sabian symbol. They're holding a similar message. I'll read the Sabian symbol in a moment. So you can see right opposite the new moon is Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. But we can also see that Saturn is at 28 degrees and this new moon is at 28 degrees. So they're literally exactly opposite each other, just minutes apart. So Saturn is the big player, right, in this new moon chart. The face-off is what is the relationship I have within myself, my soul life? What identity have I developed? Versus what is the nature of the reality that I experience outside of me? There's a real what appears to be a polarization of two very different realities. But what's important to remember with oppositions, and this is the case with any opposition, opposition holds the key, the promise, the ability for an incredible sense of illumination and awareness. So this Saturn can very much, for so many people, just be projected out there and felt and experienced from the point of view of being restricted and limited relative to just getting on with life and having to have to adhere to the policies, rules, government laws and so forth, specifically around this COVID-19 situation. I'm obviously referring to that. And we can just feel Saturn's really hard energy. It's Saturn coming down on us. It's like the disciplinarian, the energy of this is not going to be easy for you. You're going to have to work pretty hard at working things out here. You're going to have to work hard at balancing this out. So this is Cancer is inner reality. Cancer is Capricorn is our external nature of reality. And so we're being asked to draw some sense of balance here with these polarized energies. And like I said, if we project that Saturn out there, then it's just going to be the next month, because this energy is going to be carried through until the next new moon, right? And I mean, realistically, we had a solar eclipse in Cancer already. So this energy of Cancer Capricorn is speaking very strongly to us still, even though the nodes have shifted out of those signs. Two new moons in Cancer, that's a pretty important message that's coming through, which is basically about what is my self-image, what is my identity, what is the nature of my reality? How do I understand myself? How do I understand the nature of my reality? Where am I at with all of that? Simply, it's just that. But because of the nature of events outside of ourselves at the moment, we are experiencing the heavy dose of the Saturn disciplinarian, restrictive, authoritative energy, that's just being projected through government bodies and so forth. So it's not an easy energy to tackle, but we can work with it inwardly. And we really need to. Pluto is also, opposite this new moon as well. It's not as close as the Saturn, but it's still there. So, Saturn-Pluto conjunction it's like breaking down the biggest walls you can imagine, our own internal walls that we've built, that we've structured. Some people have a fortress around them. So it's the breaking down of old layers, right? That's what this Saturn Pluto has been. And obviously that we are experiencing that collectively, and we are experiencing that personally within ourselves relative to where this Saturn Pluto conjunction has been dancing around in your chart. So it's opposite this new moon. So it's drawing it in. This new moon is drawing in this energy. But ultimately, to bring about a greater sense of awareness and understanding relative to our own self-image, what we project about ourselves out there. The personality part of us, which is the ego, which comes back to Cancer, is it's like, imagine that the soul is sitting just behind and projecting through, right? As the soul projects through, it needs to have some form, some identity to be able to express itself through. Well, that's what Cancer is in this case. So with a Cancer new moon, we're really looking at going back to this identity of ourself, what we've created as a self-image, which is projected to the world, to everyone around us. But it's so incredibly subjective that we ourselves can't really see it. And even those around us can't see it because it's such an inner subjective component to ourself, to who we are. But it is our job, it is our responsibility to step back in and have a look at that. Also, when we're talking about Cancer Capricorn, with Saturn in Capricorn, there is an important component to this that is asking us to take responsibility for our own emotional nature, our own emotional responses to everything that's going on, both personally and collectively. It's Capricorn that teaches us how to be more detached, you could say. Not a word that you may necessarily frequently hear related to Capricorn, but Capricorn is pretty detached, whereas Cancer is incredibly attached to its emotional sense of security and what it needs. So a Cancer can be very needy and very not very developed emotionally. So this Saturn in Capricorn is sort of shining the light, saying, okay, well, have a look at what's going on with you emotionally. Have a look at where you need to grow emotionally, and take responsibility for your own emotional nature and your own emotional development. This is another theme that's being highlighted here. And you know, it is really hardcore with Saturn Pluto opposite this new moon, because it's Pluto being the ruler of the underworld, being the ruler of mysteries, secrets, and being the ruler of revealing, exposing what's hidden, what has been hidden. There's going to be some material that will also unfold, that will expose things that have been hidden. And I'm specifically referring to, I suppose, what's being presented out there in the world at the moment relative to the current COVID-19 situation. Things will be exposed and revealed in bigger ways, because that's the nature of Pluto. It doesn't leave any stone unturned, and it has the capacity to get to the absolute bottom of any situation. So more exposure of deeper truths to come through, which can be very useful, because Neptune in all this picture has created mass confusion and mass hysteria on so many levels. There's so many divided opinions, North Node in Gemini at the moment and South Node in Sagittarius. There's this sense of diversity of opinions and views, which is fine. We need diversity. Diversity ultimately should equate to unity, you know. But when you throw Neptune into the mix, there can be a lot of confusion, deception, smoke and mirrors, deliberately lying and things like that, right? So the Neptune in this picture has created a lot of confusion. And back to the Pluto is the one that exposes what's been hidden, for better or for worse. So it's carrying this kind of energy with it too. But Cancer is initially, it's going to feel quite threatened by Saturn Pluto being right opposite it. And I think that what that really is speaking to as well is how do we create a greater sense of safety and security within ourselves, regardless of what's appearing outside in the world? You know, I mean, there are examples, for instance, you know, some people who go to prison who totally, you know, transform themselves in ways that are just so miraculous. And so that is a very powerful example of the deepest transformations will always occur within you, regardless of what appears outside of you. And that's what awareness is about. Because with awareness, we can stand in a position where we're not projecting, where we stand in our power regardless of what's going on around us. There are many incredible souls, people that have come onto this earth plane specifically to be advocates for that kind of journey, who have lived in, you know, through war and all sorts of situations. Point being that our sense of safety and security primarily comes from within us. So whatever appears out there doesn't have to be a threat. But the thing to understand about that is that it's knowing that, first of all, life is impermanent. Nothing is forever. So we can't control everything. We can't have everything as we want it every time we want it. There's an element to life that is so incredibly mysterious, that's beyond looking at charts, that's completely out of our control. And so that element of life calls on us, especially at times like this, to trust and to go into deeper spaces within our own consciousness, to connect to that, to establish a connection and a relationship with safety from within, security from within. There's a really good comment here. Jeff says that the only real security is the internal security. And think about that, because that's a very powerful point, which is what I was just trying to explain. And one way to understand that in very simple terms is to say that, this is true for all of us, regardless of how much we build outside ourselves, you know, a home, a career, material resources, whatever it may be, all of which provide some level of apparent security. Well, any one of those things can be gone like that at any time for any person. So how much control do we really have then of what's happening externally? Pretty much none. So this is why, if we can really understand what it means to feel totally secure, and safe within ourselves, then everything around us will naturally just flow in the order that it needs to. And when it comes into our field of experience, we can appreciate it, we can work with it, we can grow from it, etc. And when it's time for it to go, we can also allow it to leave. The resistance is what brings the suffering, the inability to allow life to move as it chooses to move, and to always come back to the realization of, yes, I am a person, I'm an individual, I have this personality, I have this body, but all of this is for the purposes of my soul to come through and experience life in the myriad of ways that it wishes to experience life in any given lifetime. This is what this energy is speaking to. It's a reminder of that. It's a reminder of the external reality is actually not within our control. That's Saturn. And Cancer, the new moon, which is the inner reality, the inner security. This is where we can have a greater sense of understanding and a greater sense of not feeling threatened, as it were. Because no one can take away an inner level of security or safety that you feel. No one. So how important is it then to develop that within us? I think extremely. And if you look over here, Goddess Vesta, which has been transiting in Cancer, she's part of this new moon. The sun and the moon went over Vesta before they got to their new moon position. So they're kind of carrying that Vesta energy. And what's Vesta? Vesta is devotion. What do you invest yourself in? The word investment comes from Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, the flame. She correlates to the inner life, the soul life. It's the alchemical, deep, devotional work that we do on ourselves. And it's in Cancer here. So it's taking us back to the soul life, the necessity of going back into ourself to understand who we are, to understand the nature of our reality. So she has a strong presence in this energy as well. Okay, so I just want to show you a couple of things about the US chart, because this is really quite interesting. Right, so the new moon, so this is the national chart for USA. Look at Pluto, 27 degrees of Capricorn. Where is the new moon? Exactly opposite this new moon. Opposite this Pluto. This, I mean, I really feel for all people in the USA, because the cataclysmic events that are going on are not going to end anytime soon, in my personal opinion. USA is having a Pluto return soon. There's a few things going on. I'm actually going to present a whole video just on USA, and I've got some material that I've prepared for that. So I don't want to bring all that in right now, but I just wanted to show the chart relative to this new moon. It's opposite Pluto. Transiting Neptune is coming up to form an opposition to natal Neptune of America. Eris, the goddess Eris, is forming a square to the natal Mercury of USA. Transiting Mars at the time of the new moon on the 21st, that new moon that I've just been talking about, transiting Mars is going to be opposite the natal Saturn of USA. What else was there? And Uranus, transiting Uranus, not so long ago was squaring the nodes of the USA chart. There's so much happening to the chart of USA, so we couldn't possibly expect things to resolve anytime soon, to be quite frank. There's a lot that's going to happen, but in the short term, relative to this new moon, the next 4 weeks for USA is going to be the underlying theme is basically the new moon opposite the natal Pluto. So we're talking about Pluto rules viruses, and Pluto is the planet that would be associated to Black Lives Matter. So these two things that are quite huge in America are going to go through a pretty intense wave over the next 4 weeks. I know it's not great news, and I can't deliver something that's not there. I have to speak to what I see. So I'm just kind of putting it out there as a message of just be aware that the next 4 weeks in US in the short term, then it's not looking very easy, if I'm going to be honest. So I would encourage you all to just really take care of yourselves, to just put in place what you need to create that safety for you at the moment. It's really important. Yeah, America's chart is just being bombarded, being hit off by so many things. I'm going to come back and do a whole session on that. But look, from a point of view of consciousness, even though this new moon has got some difficult things we've got to work through with that Saturn, if you can listen to what I said, all the points about being able to go back inside yourself and examine your own self-image, examine your own emotional nature, your level of maturity and development around that. We are all developing and we are all maturing. No one has got everything down pat. No one's perfect. We are all doing the best we can at any given moment. So sometimes we have really intense cataclysmic cycles come through, and this is the time for all of this. So the process that we experience internally is obviously quite intensified, but it's also the opportunity for accelerated evolution to be experienced. That's what this can be if we work with it, and understand ourselves. And the god Apollo, finally, and I'll leave it here, as I said, correlates to light, wisdom, consciousness, knowledge coming through. We've also had the comet Neowise that's been very active in our beautiful skies the last few weeks, and I think is active right through till August sometime. That can be understood from a spiritual plane of experience, in that, think about the name Neo-wise, new wisdom. It's being transmitted onto the earth plane. We can also tune into that vibration. The Sabian symbol for 29 degrees of Cancer, which is the degree you would look at, because the new moon's at 28. So with Sabian symbols, how it works is you go to the subsequent degree, typically. The 29th degree of Cancer is a Greek muse weighing newborn twins in golden scales. The keynote is the intuitive weighing of alternatives. So there's something coming through. A Greek muse, the muses are the ones that inspired humanity. through art, music, knowledge, wisdom, philosophy, sacred teachings, you name it. That's where the word music comes from. It comes from the word muse. And what does music do? It generally moves our soul. It touches our heart. It brings us joy. You know, music is such a gift, such a gift. And this 29th degree of Cancer is saying that it's a Greek muse energy that's vibrating on the 29th degree of Cancer, trying to bring through some wisdom about alternatives relative to our situation. The alternatives will be possibly very different for each of us, but from a collective perspective, it's going to come back to how we're going to deal with the nature of reality as it appears before us, and how we're going to foster and nurture a greater sense of inner security within ourselves, regardless of the challenges that appear outside of ourselves. That's how I read this Sabian symbol. But just a few words of what it says. The symbol seems to show that the return to nature pictured in the preceding symbol is the only one of two possibilities. So just that statement there alone correlates to symbolizing that we must return back to nature. This new moon is highlighting that message. It's carrying that frequency. We must return back to nature. How far away from nature have we gotten? Quite a bit. Quite a bit. You know, we live in this world where the ego and the personality has just taken over. Everything has been reduced to power, success, you know, external achievement, lack of respect for nature and Mother Earth. So this new moon is also reminding us, holding that frequency, we must return back to nature. By returning back to nature, we return back to an inner dimension of ourself, which is real and authentic, natural. Goes on to say, somehow the repolarization of consciousness and life activities implied by that symbol may be more a dream or ideal than practical reality. In any case, at this stage in the process of individualization, two ways are open. The individual person may hesitate before making his decisions. His intuition, in brackets, the muse, is able to show him what the choice is. Perhaps there can be a way of combining the two alternatives. But as the next symbol implies, the one which in the end has the greatest appeal may not be the nature way. So there's two alternate realities, if you like, in other words, is what it's trying to say. And by activating your intuition, listening to the muse, she's trying to give us a message. We have a better chance, a better opportunity to reconnect back to the way of nature. Because at the beginning it said this symbol seems to show that the return to nature, which is reflected through two possibilities. And here we have Saturn, which overall depicts the nature of reality as it appears in this third dimension reality. So that's one side. And the other side is the Cancer, which is the inner reality, the inner sense of nature. So two different realities. Which one are we going to choose to connect with? That's up to us individually. So you can see even the Sabian symbol, the asteroid Apollo, all pretty much giving the same message. Is there anything else? Let me see. No, I think that's it actually. I'm going to leave it here for today. And I'll be back soon. I really want to talk about the Mars retrograde cycle. I want to talk about the USA charts and just a number of things that are going on there. And I also need to do some other work. So I just want to say thank you as well. There were quite a few of you that sent me a lot of beautiful wishes because I went through a really a crisis period with a family member um, where health was compromised, and it was really intense and scary, and I was I couldn't focus on anything else but that. So anyway, that's healed and resolved. Thank the goddesses, thank God, thank the angels, thank thank lots of energies. Um, so that's, yeah, just thank you to those of you who took the time to send me a message or an email or whatever it was. It really touches me every time somebody does that. I really, really appreciate it. So sending you all a lot of love and a lot of blessings, and I hope that you are all keeping well and safe. And I hope this information speaks to you and touches your heart in some kind of way, or gives you some ideas, some things to think about. And I'll see you guys very soon.